What's up, everybody, and welcome to this edition of the Double Foul Podcast, the special white crazy. You know, that's anybody's guess as good as mine, just to bring the content to you people. Jimmy Cook alongside ordinarily my partner in crime, Colin O'Connor. He is off tonight. Joining us instead, when you have the quality of depth that we have here on the Double Foul Podcast, you are rolling as heavily as the NBA champion Golden State Warriors. The great Al Cook joining us this evening, a Butler alum himself, and anxious to see what his previously last year playoff bound and promising upstart rise with Victor Oladipo and Indiana Pacers are going to do tonight. Al, how are you doing this evening?
Doing well, Jimmy. Just excited to watch the draft here. It's been a couple good trades already. Michael Porter Jr.'s fallen. Kind of interested to see where he goes. As you can see, got the Pacer gear on. Got the Butler hat on for Keelan Martin. Hoping maybe he gets drafted by somebody. But, yeah, I'm excited, Jim.
And, Al, it should be a lot of fun this evening overall. The draft is just getting started. I obviously joke at the beginning of us being a little behind in terms of getting started tonight. We'll be breaking a lot of things for you this evening, mainly piggybacking off of Twitter reports and discussing what we think about those reactions in real time. In addition, just kind of looking at how the draft is shaped up as a whole. Al mentioned a few moments ago the fact that Michael Porter Jr. is still falling. Looks like right now that Denver is heavily considering Michael Porter Jr. right now with the 14th pick in the draft. An interesting landing spot for him if he's actually the pick that Denver decides to go with tonight. Al, the biggest takeaway that I've seen this whole week and this whole draft process, especially with Michael Porter Jr., is the health concerns. Obviously, there is whether or not it's going to be a long-term factor for him. I mean, he's shown time and time again at Missouri the kind of player he is when he's been healthy, but obviously that was a big red flag for a lot of teams. That's why he's fallen this far. It'd be interesting to see if they could pair him up with a combination out there in Denver, the likes of Murray and Harris. It'd make for an interesting fit for sure. The question is this actually the pick, and will those health concerns be something that people need to be worried about long term?
Yeah, I think, these injury concerns here are just such a shame because I think he's got a franchise player, tag written all over him. Like he has the face of the franchise. It looks like he's, obviously one of the best players here if healthy. But, yeah, as you mentioned, with the Nuggets pick here at 14, I'm really interested to see if they end up trading the pick. They've had a lot of talks with a lot of teams trying to shed salary for guys like Will Barton to bring back. And, they want to get rid of Kenneth Faried. So, yeah, I'm really intrigued to see what they do here.
Yeah, and to be able to pair Porter up with the likes of Jokic, I forgot to mention him. I mean, it's a fun team brewing out there in Denver. Both Shams and Woj reporting that Denver's cleared the way and are choosing Michael Porter Jr. with this 14th pick. Al and myself, Al repping the, if I am correct on this, the traditional Xfinity Comcast direct feed, myself using PlayStation View tonight. So Al might be ahead of me on certain news, but we're all even on the Twitterverse with Woj and Sham.
Yeah, Twitter is ahead of all of us.
It's really wild to think about how much the draft itself has changed over the last even 5 years. Myself and Al have actually, growing up in Indiana and, being a stone's throw away from one another in terms of watching the draft. We've been able to see this evolve as Twitter has continually crept into being a mainstream full-on media device that's used by reporters and, by individuals in general, how easy it's been to go ahead and break news 2, 3, 4 picks ahead to the point that I'll still watch the draft every year, but as well as almost a front office individual that's making the pick knows who's going to be selected well before it happens.
Oh, and Woj, his tweet came out with the first 6 picks of the draft. I haven't actually checked it to see if it was accurate, but given that it's Woj, I assume it was. yeah, it's a good thing Twitter's ahead of us with our lag in terms of our TV signals.
Twitter bringing people together regardless of the situation, for sure there, Al. And actually, I'm glad you brought that up because it was something that I tried to make a mark on, make a screenshot on today while that was happening. And I do believe I saved that. Give me a second. So Woj, as Al mentioned, as he set up there, as Michael Porter is indeed the picks for the Denver Nuggets this evening at the 14 slot. The actual order that happened was DeAndre Ayton, Marvin Bagley III, Luka Doncic, Jared Jackson Jr., Trae Young, Mo Bamba, and I believe that's as far as he went with 6. So Woj went Ayton. He went Bagley Jr. at 2. He said Doncic at 3, but he had alluded that obviously the Hawks would be making that trade. He left the 4th spot blank. I don't know why, if he ran out of characters or what happened there, but he was right with 4 of Jaren Jackson. 5 was the only one he got wrong. He listed 5 to the Mavs with Mo Bamba. He did not mention anything about the trade, obviously, because that'd be a hard prediction to make. Then had he still gotten him right in order, that would have been impressive. Only off by 1. He put Mo Bamba at 5 to the Mavs, and he put Trae Young at 6 to the Magic. Instead, the Doncic and Young trade happened between Atlanta and Dallas. Doncic obviously heading to the Mavs and Young heading to the Hawks in that deal, where the Hawks also got a future first rounder out of it. And Mo Bamba ends up in Orlando. Bamba himself, he's an Adidas, he made an appearance on the Adidas Nation circuit a couple of years ago. Had the opportunity to talk with Bamba, had an opportunity to talk with Ayton. Both of those two big men in their class were respected to be top-tier centers, respectively. I really think in terms of just the two of them, looking at the two big men in terms of not to ignore Bagley, but just Bamba and Ayton, how they've kind of always been packaged together, I could see both of them having very similar careers, despite the fact that there was a discrepancy in terms of pick 1 versus pick 5, or pick 6.
Yeah, that's really interesting, Jim. I wanted to hear your perspective on Mo Bamba, since I know you had some closer experiences than, the average NBA fan.
Bamba is, in terms of both the personality, and Ayton's kind of the same way. They're both such well-spoken young men in general. And I remember, because it was, those are obviously just kind of open gyms, but just games where you're scrimmaging, playing around. I remember asking him, what is it like to have that type of ability to force your will on an individual and alter a guard shot, knowing the kind of presence that you are underneath the rim? I mean, both their wingspans, Ayton's and Bamba's, just absolutely monstrous. You're talking about trying to drive at tree trunks, essentially. But no, I think that clearly on paper and going into this draft, Ayton's the better player. Ayton established himself more in his 1 year of college. Same with Bamba, both one and dones. I could really see a similar career pattern for both of them, depending on, because they've got a history of doing this, if the Magic can actually keep talent they're drafting and develop them into something special. We've seen where Oladipo's gone over the last 3 or 4 years. It ended up working out for him, not so much for Orlando.
Yeah, I think Orlando as an organization obviously has struggled. It's always a bad sign when one of your was it the GM, correct, that had sent the picture of his whiteboard of players.
I forgot about that. Something like that. I do remember that.
You're a bad organization when you have stories like that coming out.
Yep, that's definitely not what you want to see at all. It's much like having burner accounts leak out circa 76ers this offseason. Not the type of way you want to conduct yourself in the highest organizational strategy operations for a team's front office.
Yeah, I think we both can agree that they do seem to draft good talent at times. So, I hope it'll be interesting to see just kind of how their young players develop, and also, just past the draft, see, what they do with guys like Aaron Gordon, and, see where they go from there. But Yeah, really, really interesting though. Just overall.
Al, biggest surprise to this point to you in the NBA draft at this point in time? For me, sorry, for myself, I mean, it's probably got to be the trade of Doncic. I know it's an easy one, but I really didn't know if the Hawks were going to make a move like that. And I honestly, it could be a situation where I didn't buy the Trae Young hype. Not that I don't think he's going to be a good player, part of it, but I didn't buy into the hype. In fact, I was obviously, as we've addressed on the Double Foul podcast before, being a LeBron fan myself, I was really worried that the Cavs were going to end up getting Trae Young because that would be the second franchise in a row for the city of Cleveland where they wasted a draft pick on an Oklahoma player. So I was really hoping that wouldn't happen for them. Thankfully, it didn't. And in this particular instance, that move to see him end up in Atlanta, that really surprised me a lot to see the Hawks trade out of that spot.
Yeah, I agree. I was either going to say that or the fact that Porter fell to 14th. But even then, there was some concern, obviously, before the draft with his injury history. So, yeah, I tend to agree with you on the Trae Young and Doncic trade. Was really just weird to see the Hawks trade essentially for Trae Young. I mean, they did get a pick out of it, so it may work out for them. But it's kind of cool to see Doncic though overall coming to the Mavs, and be cool to see what he does with that organization.
Yeah, it'll be interesting for sure. As we see the draft shot of, I got the headsets on, so I can't hear what was said. All I saw was Kawhi Leonard and Indiana Pacers.
Oh yeah,
and I know people always like to bash on that in general.
Oh yeah, best draft pick they may have made in the last decade.
Oh man, debate if we so, Al. Debate if we so could be true. Hey, I mean, the player that got in that trade did end up playing in an NBA Finals. I mean, it's important. It's important to note that.
That's true. Was a Finals pick there, so that's good.
Oh man.
I wanted to mention. Sorry to cut you off, Jay Cook, but I thought it was interesting that the Cavs did take Colin Sexton. He seemed like a guy that LeBron was pretty high on.
That's a trade.
And I figured, it kind of serves two birds in their instance of trying to keep LeBron. And, I think he was the best point guard available and probably one of the best players that was available. If you, I guess, factor in the injury history with Porter. But I don't know. I wanted to hear your thoughts on that, I guess, as far as it pertains to LeBron.
Well, in terms of the move to go ahead and get Sexton, I mean, I like his play. I like the way that he kind of rose his draft stock over the second half of the college basketball season. Specifically speaking, I think that when it comes to guard play and what was available at that point in time, you're not going to find a more versatile guard in terms of two-way talent in this draft. Honestly, I don't know if it's enough to keep LeBron. I still think there's moves that need to be made. And I don't know if there's going to be attractive enough options to move the salaries of the likes of Tristan Thompson or J.R. Smith without attaching picks to it. And I don't know if they have it in their cards. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to agree, but I just was intrigued just because I knew that LeBron seemed to be pretty high on Colin Sexton. Obviously, he's not going to fill the void for LeBron and be the absolute selling point as far as him staying in Cleveland, but it's a piece. So
at least it wasn't like the last time LeBron was a free agent and there was a draft pick involved, and the savior Shabazz Napier was being dangled in front of the Heat, and then they picked him, and then we all know how that went. So
sure.
Al, I'm going to let you tell our audience in terms of what you would ideally like to see happen with the Indiana Pacers in this draft. I like the likes of going live on the fly for a podcast when you have a 9-month-old puppy on hand. Apparently, unplugging the TV is a guaranteed move when a tennis ball rolls underneath the TV stand. So, Al, I know you got Indiana close to your heart. I know it's right in your backyard. What would you like to see from the Pacers in this draft? And, any other thoughts or surprise moves you'd like to see as we continue to roll through round one?
I think, just out of morbid curiosity, I'm interested to see where Grayson Allen ends up. Obviously all of his on-the-court issues and tripping and things of that nature. Just interested to see what kind of organization ends up picking him. I think as far as the Pacers are concerned, they're at a really, really interesting spot at the 23rd pick. I hope they go for a 3-and-D wing or some kind of point guard, but I don't know if the value will necessarily be there on point guards. So I really just, I think at their position in the draft, you really just have to see where players end up falling and sort of take the best value given the circumstances. I don't know if you heard my comment on what was intriguing on the draft, but Jim, so I just wanted to repeat it. I was interested in seeing where Grayson Allen falls. I have a morbid curiosity about it, just seeing what kind of organization ends up picking him. And I don't know what your thoughts on that are, but it's not like the hottest name per se in the draft remaining.
No, what I'm laughing at is that we are currently 7 picks away from an organization of very interesting caliber, potentially taking Grayson Allen.
The Pacers are hit and miss, big misses, big hits.
I mean, if you're looking for a pairing for TJ Leaf and Victor Oladipo, I can look no further than Grayson.
Oh man, I don't know. I might leave the podcast here if that happens.
It's funny to bring the listeners up to speed. We weren't doing a podcast at this time last year. In fact, we were just watching at Al's uncle, my brother's house, for the draft last year, and there was a consensus in the room, not myself because I didn't care one way or the other, I was just there for havoc. If TJ Leaf was drafted by the Pacers, that the family members that were Pacers fans were going to get up and leave, and that would be the end of their draft night. Well, you know how history went. The Pacers selected TJ Leaf, and everybody was out. Al, could we be seeing similar circumstances if it is a Grayson Allen all the way to 23 and the Pacers somehow – I mean, Al, what do you think their biggest needs are coming in?
They need a 3-and-D wing. If they potentially may need a power forward if Thad's opts out and doesn't sign. I think those are the biggest areas. Point guard's also an issue, but I just don't know if the value is going to be there for, I think the point guards that are available are ones that could be great, like 6-man.
Al Cook, I don't mean to cut you off real quick, but the Suns themselves are about to make a selection, and it's supposed to be Zaire Smith. However, per Shams, Philadelphia is going to end up breaking the hearts of the Bridges family as Mikal Bridges is set to be traded to Phoenix, and Zaire Smith headed to Philadelphia. So that from Shams reporting that, and a lot of people very surprised by that source's move to be made. It really seemed like a good story for, I know the Bridges family, and, with Villanova and Philadelphia in general, there being a lot of connected fans across the board for both those organizations. A shocking move in general there. That's going to break some hearts for sure.
Yeah, it's going to hurt a lot of fans. They just showed him and his mom on ESPN, and we're talking about how his mom works with the organization.
She's like the director of or vice president of HR for the team.
That's going to sting.
Yeah, that's going to be Where's Brian when you need him? That's all I got to say. Al, in addition to that, Shams reporting that it's supposed to be the 2021 Miami first rounder that the Suns have is being sent to Philadelphia in exchange for Mikal Bridges. So there you go. In terms of that rounding out, very interesting. As one of my favorite writers, Matt Moore, tweets out, you're going to have Booker, Bridges, Bender, and Ayton out in Phoenix. That's going to be a fun team to watch next year for sure also.
Yeah, it'll be a good league pass team. They got a lot of nice young talent there, and they could be a very interesting team next year. They may not be competing for much, but fun team nonetheless.
Yeah, it's going to be one of those situations where for Philadelphia specifically, it's an interesting move like we talked about. But for the Suns, for Smith himself, he had a 41.5-inch vertical leap maxed out there on the 2018 draft combine. He was tied for third best in that specific category. The athleticism is there. He was a 17-18 All Big 12 honorable mention. Made a lot of impact at Texas Tech, enough to the point that Philadelphia is trading, essentially a player they could have gotten at 10, but might not have been the right move at that point in time. And now you're getting more back in terms of the 2021 first rounder. They're trading 6 spots back effectively by making that deal, bringing in Smith and then acquiring a draft pick for it. It'll be interesting, Al Cook. You're suddenly looking at swapping out Bridges for a 6'4", 6'5" small forward, and this is a team that is supposed to be involved allegedly in the LeBron James sweepstakes this offseason. So, it's one of those moves where it's like, I guess the more that pick's not going to matter likely long run, but the more that, at least in the LeBron sweepstakes, not for Philadelphia, that very well could be a valuable pick down the line. But in terms of what he could do, that's I don't know. I don't know how to feel about that move. Al, what do you think?
I tend to agree. I think he's kind of a guy I think that needs a year or two to kind of work on his offensive game. He seems to be a very springy player, very energetic. I saw a ton of putback dunks by him throughout the year. I think that he just needs to develop his shot, which is interesting for him to go on the Sixers. I feel like between their point guards that can't shoot, it's an interesting selection in that regard. But I don't know. I think overall, they've got a ton of talent. It's a little bit of a bizarre trade, though, to be honest. I thought Bridges was a good fit, a better fit for them. And at least, that's my opinion on it. I don't know. You may feel differently.
It's hard to say, I actually forgot because this whole NBA playoffs and March Madness has been a blur. I forgot about the deep run that Texas Tech had made in the tournament this year. Smith was a huge part of that. It's hard to not like this story when you look at an individual that he wasn't ranked in his recruiting class in 2017, and he turns himself into a first-round pick, is heading to a Philadelphia organization that is, by and large, supposed to be one of the top teams in the East next year, and that could go up in terms of where they're headed depending on how free agency goes for them. It's hard to say. I don't think it's going to hurt them. Let's put it that much. I don't think that the level of talent between Bridges and Smith is enough where it's going to adversely impact them. The question of how will the fit work, it'll be interesting, Al. You make up a big point about the fact of needing some more shooters. Suddenly you might need to be cloning JJ Redick and putting 2 of them out there. I don't know. Right. I don't know what the setup's going to be there, but that is an interesting point. Like I said, though, I don't think it'll adversely affect the 76ers, and I don't think it hurts the Suns either making that move.
Yeah, I agree on that point. I guess I would counter, though, and I feel like Bridges maybe was a little more refined of a player. I don't know how high his ceiling is per se, but I feel like he doesn't have a lot of weaknesses in his game. So it was an interesting pick in that regard.
The word right now is that Milwaukee will be taking Dante DiVincenzo at number 17.
Interesting.
That's still just sources, that one from Draft Express. But that'll be, from Al, you'll relate to this with the Bulldog hat on. From a selfish perspective, I was happy that Dante DiVincenzo decided to leave his name in the draft and ultimately leave Villanova. Shout out to Butler there specifically. And apparently, for what it's worth, Al, I'm not going to try to pronounce the individual's name that had tweeted this, on top of the fact that it appears as though here at City Front Place is starting to die off, but it appears as though the Suns were intent on selecting DiVincenzo, but then got that trade call from Philly and instead decided to make that trade to get Bridges. So there's nothing too crazy for NBA Draft Day.
It's true. I'm a little surprised that Dante was picked so high. Like I thought he was gonna fall probably to Minnesota, which is 4 picks away, I guess. But I don't know. He seemed like a Tom Thibodeau kind of player that would give a lot of energy, and I think he's a solid defender. He may be somewhat limited at the moment, but yeah, very interesting. I guess where he ended up getting drafted.
For what it's worth, Al, to reassure you a little bit, not to shift off topic because you're right, it is interesting. I had seen DiVincenzo all around the board in terms of where he could possibly end up. One of the more common ones that I had seen in terms of possible destinations for him included had some technical issues there. It included him potentially going late in the first, maybe early second round. So I agree to see him that early. Very interesting. What I was going to say initially was Zaire Smith is, and this is coming from Synergy Basketball, one of the top statistical tracking metrics in the sports world, especially with the NBA and with basketball in general, especially at the college level. Specifically with Smith, not only was the most explosive leaper in the draft, as I had mentioned, he had a lot more usage than most wings do. He had no shortage, again, this is per Synergy Sports, of highlight reel-like dunks, especially tip dunks last season. In addition, there's enough of a sample size for him as a jump shooter to show that there could be growth there for him to continue to rise at that. Actually, including just NCAA threes, he shot it from about 43.6% from the field at that point in time from that range. Obviously, the closer in he gets, the better he was. 60% from inside 7 feet. When you go over to 7 to 10 feet, 41%. But he does go up. Actually, the further you go, 14 to 3-point land, 42.9%, and 43.6% from beyond the arc at the NCAA level. There's promise there for him. At least you have that going for you if you're Philadelphia, as Dante DiVincenzo announced to be selected by Milwaukee. So there is potential there. There is hope there for Philadelphia to be able to add further to their arsenal of multi-tier two-way players.
Yeah, I think another good point to bring up about the big Ragu, I think he had a good combine. When they had the scrimmage that they played, he had some pretty good plays. And I think another point that appears to be a knock on him is that he wasn't a starter. But I think Jay Wright intentionally obviously played him off the bench to kind of give their second team a spark. So it's really cool to kind of see his rise from the national championship game to now.
When you love me, the idea that he could have that kind of impact both in the semifinal and the national title game, as you alluded to there, Al. I mean, we're talking about the MOP, or the most outstanding player of the 2018 men's Final Four. It's it's not that shocking when you really think about it that they were able to go ahead and take him this early. But specifically when you look at how the projections on him were looking like a second rounder, I mean, you look at the stage he's continued to rise on throughout his whole career at this young age, and to close it with a national title, drop 31 in a national championship game as the Big East sixth man of the year. I gotta like the idea of him being in Milwaukee to a team that you could argue is just trying to add a couple more pieces to stay in the hunt in the East. They were very close with Boston last year. Granted, I know there was no Hayward. I know there was no Irving, but I don't think this is a bad look for Milwaukee.
No, not at all. I think it's a really nice selection, too, with Mike Budenholzer at the helm. He likes to play his 5 out, Spurs-esque offense. So I think overall DiVincenzo is a very nice pick.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, I'm not disappointed by that. I'm not stunned by it. A little surprised initially, but
yeah,
quite a story on him for sure. So if we look at the draft board at this point in time, Donte DiVincenzo, the most recent pick. We know Zaire Smith getting ready to be on the move. Al, I'm not going to laugh anymore because this is sad. Like it is. It was funny initially making the initial jokes, but now that I'm hearing this,
Porter,
I don't know. Not specifically about Porter. If you have another Porter comment, feel free to share that with me. No,
go ahead.
This one specifically, and I was looking for the timestamp on it, but again, the computer decided to run a little bit slow right now. What I wanted to share with you was that as of as of 8:21, so 4 minutes ago, a writer at the draft has said that Mikal Bridges has still not been informed of the trade to Phoenix. He's still answering questions about Philadelphia, talking about how excited he is to stay home.
Oh man, that's terrible.
Yeah,
I feel bad for him and his mom and his family.
I mean, I do get it.
In that regard, I mean, he still got drafted overall, so I mean, it's it's not the end of the world, but just it would have been a really cool story to see him playing in Philly, and but I mean, he's gonna have a good career, and everything will be right with the world, Jay Cook.
Everything happens for a reason, Al. Isn't that what they say?
That's right.
Oh man, I don't know. I guess I was kind of initially surprised that the idea of how they were going to do things in terms of seeing that trade happen and seeing the hype that was around Bridges in Philadelphia. There's a lot of people that, like Philadelphia fans that were there for the draft, that were hyped up about it, that were excited about the move. I hope there's no 30 for 30s being made where fans are booing and fans at the Wells Fargo Center are, throwing chairs down on the ground and are frustrated and upset that Bridges is going circa Magic taking Chris Webber and trading for Penny Hardaway. I hope there's no cutouts of Smith being held in the Wells Fargo Center right now.
Yeah, we can only hope that.
It'll be very interesting to see how the rest of the draft itself unfolds. The Spurs apparently going to select Lonnie Walker with the 18th pick in the draft. And as we do bring that up, it remains to be seen what will happen with Grayson Allen as we get ever so closer to Sir's Apocalypse 2K18, the 23rd pick. We are 5 picks away. Al, tell me something, objectively speaking, because I think even though he's emotional, even though he's got the bad boy Duke mentality to him like every Duke prospect before him, I think that Grayson Allen is a hard worker. I think he's a legitimate competitor. I think he can survive in this league, move away from the chaos that's always surrounded him, Do you think he'd be a big fit in Indiana? And to be clear, I haven't read a single piece of Pacers draft coverage, from the likes of local writer Scott Agnes, for Vigilant Sports and over at CBS Sports 1430. I haven't looked at any Indy Star coverage. I haven't read anything that Pritchard and company could be looking for here. But do you think that if they were to go that route, just to stir the pot a little bit here, would you see him being a good fit in terms of what he brings to the table?
I think as far as his basketball skills, I think he is a pretty decent to good fit. Obviously he can shoot and score in bunches. He does lack some defensive skills, but I don't know if he, I'm really torn, I guess, in terms of his fit. And that's not even factoring in, I guess, the on the court personality issues he's had. But I think he may end up falling, and I think a team, like Warriors or some already loaded team, maybe even like Houston or something like that. If he ended up falling there, I think if he fell in like a strong organization with some strong leadership and veterans, he could be a good fit. But personally, as a Pacers fan, I am rooting against Grayson Allen pick.
It's gonna be fun, Al. That's all I can say. And I'm not saying that like last year where I felt and it actually did end up happening. I have no idea, but specifically, it'll be interesting to see how the chips fall here, because I know with the NBA mock drafts that were posted, specifically the one on CBSSports.com that gave the final look in to their thoughts on the top 60. Specifically, I want to say he was at the back end of round 1. Let me check here. So you could be safe. Well, Al, maybe not. They had the Pacers getting Troy Brown, and Brown went 15 to this is just one source I see. Brown went 15 to the Wizards. A lot of chips to fall where they may, but specifically Allen was slated to be 31 to the Suns. That's still in play right now. A lot of interesting pieces. Jalen Brunson, somebody I still want to look at, not necessarily for the Pacers, but just a possible selection in terms of guys I want to see come off the board. I know they worked out Martin a lot. I'm forgetting about him. Maybe that's a move they make. That'd be a nice story. Al, what are your thoughts on all that?
Well, I think you were talking about Keelan Martin, correct?
Yes.
Okay, yeah, I think he would be an interesting story here late in the second round. I think he had 12 teams. I think he visited, so I think even if he doesn't get drafted, he's going to be a lock on some summer league team.
Do you see him being a back end of 50 if the Pacers decide to go get him?
Yeah, I see him being there. I don't know if they're going to pick him necessarily, but it's really going to depend, I guess, on the board of who's available. Guys like Alkin Rawls from Arizona, Malik Newman. There may be some good value still there at that point. But overall, it'd be a very good story. And obviously, as a Butler fan, I'm sure you and I would both enjoy that aspect of it.
Let me tell you this: if Martin's a Pacer, I'm going to be purchasing my first Pacers jersey. Well, that's not. I did buy an Oladipo T-shirt jersey. Gotta give the IUBB love. You know how it is. You gotta give some love there to the alma mater and to him being able to be in Indiana. But it's going to be interesting. I'm more excited to see exactly what's going to happen as the first round continues to work itself around. I'm continuing to be enamored by the amount of Scrabble-like words that Woj is using in terms of to choose exactly what adjectives he's going to describe to how teams are making selections. One of the last ones he made, I know the Trailblazers took a shot at. He used fixated for Lonnie Walker and the Spurs. The Trailblazers said that it was a Scrabble score of 18. However, it could have been 34 if the X was on a triple letter square. So you never know what kind of point total is going.
Yeah, I think Woj right now has his phone and his thesaurus there with him. He's working on all the great adjectives to throw out.
Absolutely know that moves that are going to be made in terms of tools you need for the draft, it's got to be a thesaurus. You got to have one on hand, even if it's a pocket one. I don't care if it's one of those like dollar store little auto, like little electronic ones, like the pocket Bibles, but for thesaurus, you got to have one handy. You never know when you're going to need one.
Yeah, I mean, you need to know every synonym for potential. I mean, there's a lot of names that are read, so you have to make sure to have that available at your disposal at any time. On a more serious note, now that you had brought it up earlier, Jalen Brunson, I'm really intrigued to see where he goes as well, just because he's somewhat limited, I guess, in his size and athletically he's doesn't have like the highest ceiling per se, but he just feels like one of those guys that could be like a great 6-man or second team point guard, a la Derek Fisher, that just has a long 10, 12-year career. I don't know. What are your opinions on Jalen Brunson? Because he obviously had a couple other players here that got drafted ahead of him that were on his team on a deep roster. But what are your thoughts, Jim?
I mean, specifically with Jalen Brunson, when I look at him, I see an individual that as a guard, the amount of both athleticism that he brings to the table, as well as his multi-tool skills as a guard to be able to not only set up teams for success, or set up his teammates, for success, both with his passing and his ability just to go out and make plays. I mean, you're looking at a guard that is projected to be late first, early second round. I mean, if you're able to continue to steal him as he falls late, like if you're a team like, say, if he falls this late, which I'd be shocked if he did, if you're Memphis potentially at 32, if you're the Kings don't really need a guard. If you're the Nets and you're looking to go after him, maybe that's a pick you make. I mean, he's a playmaker that's going to be able to, regardless of who's around him, set up the rest of them for success. He was a critical cog in those national titles, and whoever ends up with him is going to be very happy with the selection they made, regardless of when it happens.
Yeah, I mean, he seems like a very high IQ player. Obviously, his dad was a player in the NBA. I think he's got a lot of good leadership skills that, obviously watching Big East games, that was pretty evident that he was, their on the court leader and really their extension of Jay Wright. So overall, it should be pretty, be interesting to see where he goes, where he ends up.
And Al, also for what it's worth, doesn't matter if trades happen or not. One of those trades with Miles Bridges of Michigan State heading to Charlotte. You could meet Miles Bridges at the Hornets fan shop from 12:30 to 1 tomorrow. So when you're following all 30 NBA teams, you're bound to get some advertisements from the likes of those NBA teams and advertising their new draft picks. Al, the Minnesota Timberwolves set to go on the clock here momentarily. You look at this team, so much promise going into last season. Andrew Wiggins, the Cat. I know you're a big fan of the Cat, Karl Anthony Towns, Jimmy Butler. I mean, you look at this team, so much promise, so much fun. I was so excited when they brought in Butler, and they never, obviously some injuries here and there, but they never really lived up to that type of hype that was set upon them. Maybe the young Wolves, the Pups, perhaps, too much set on them early on last year.
Yeah, I think you could tell, too, that their second team and their depth overall just, struggled a bit at times. I believe Jamal Crawford as well as a free agent, if I'm not mistaken. And yeah, I think they really just need some depth, really, from the second team. So I'm not exactly sure who they'll go after here, but I thought Jalen Brunson, obviously, or DiVincenzo, like I said, would have been good picks, but it's probably way too early for Brunson. So yeah, I'm not sure where they're going to go here. Do you have any idea, Jim, where you think they'll go?
I got to think that I have to think that with Minnesota, you're looking for best available, probably something at the guard slot. But truthfully, at this point, with what the Wolves need, I mean, we're watching both ESPN and NBA TV coverage. I fully believe that they do need, I think, 3-point shooting would be a nice addition there. But that's hard to say if you necessarily need to grab that in the draft versus being able to continue to develop your bench. And any draft pick you make when you have a young, talented team like Minnesota, that's likely where they're going to be headed is to the bench to start off with, just to get some reps. I don't think Brunson would be a terrible pick here, truthfully, if they were to want to go ahead and pull the trigger on that. But in terms of players that have really fallen, I mean, I don't know. The draft has kind of gone the way I expected. I like Aaron Holiday a lot. I believe he's still on the board out of UCLA. In fact, I didn't mean to plan this, but ESPN is just showing him right now. That's what just happened. I know Al saw it a couple minutes earlier, but I mean, he was one of the best, best guards in recent memory at UCLA. He averaged 20 a game. Made a really impact in the Pac-12. I wouldn't be surprised at all to see that happen.
Yeah, I think he's kind of got a similar situation, I guess, with Brunson as far as being a player that I think is going to more be a second team kind of depth potential. I think he's a little limited too as far as size and his span, if I'm not mistaken, is somewhat limited for being a point guard. But I think he's got a lot of talent too. I think he'll be a good fit for a team like the Wolves, for example, that needs some high energy, depth.
For sure. No, I completely agree with that. I know it could be on my end. I don't know if it's full scale on there either, but your connection was cutting in and out a little bit there, Al, but I did make out most of what you were saying. I wanted to let you know, I hear him in the background. I'm sure he's interested in getting on here. As we get closer to that Pacers pick, the current patriarch of the Cook clan, Rich Cook, is in the building. I could hear him. I know that this is a interesting draft for the Pacers, an insanely ahead of schedule, awesome season for Indiana this past year. You take the Eastern Conference champions to 7 games. Debatably, probably could have, should have, maybe knocked them out in that series. Either way, though, insane experience for that whole team from top to bottom. I want to wait to see who Minnesota ends up selecting here first before we do bring Rich Cook in. It looks like specifically Adam Silver is going to continue the insane NBA tradition because they lock everything up in terms of pick order at 2 p.m. before the draft. They're reporting trades, at sometimes half hour later when the actual trades happen. I'm over-exaggerating a little bit there, but reporting on that Suns-Sixers trade. And it looks like it is Josh Okogie headed over to Minnesota from Georgia Tech. So the T-Wolf mascot happy. And I don't know how the Minnesota fan base itself is reacting to that move. But specifically with him, I know he was a third-team All-ACC player last season. Left as a sophomore. A lot of sophomores and a lot of young, youthful talent, or a lot of second-year players leaving for the draft this year. I believe CBS had him, and this indeed they did, projected to Golden State in the second round to try to reach out to him. That's exactly where they had him at. So they had him at, not in the second round. Sorry, late in the first round, so 7 picks from now. They had the Warriors try to make a move on him, and now he's going to Minnesota. Al, any true reactions to that? And if not, I do want to bring in the patriarch himself on this. We got all the eras of claim now. Rich, before we get your full take on who you want to see the Pacers pick, because I know they are upcoming here, you could summarize a little bit your thoughts on this past Pacers season, and then specifically, Rich, Al doesn't want him. I'm just kind of poking the bear to see if it'll actually happen for a second year in a row. But Al, Rich, how would you feel about seeing Grayson Allen in a Pacers jersey next year?
Well, the Pacers seem to have an affinity towards white players. I'm not sure what it is. Maybe the Larry Bird legacy of wanting to kind of see himself in the draft picks. Of course, it didn't hold true for Lance or Paul George, two of his better picks. But I mean, Grayson Allen's certainly a great shooter. I would like to see, personally, the Pacers go for somebody a little more athletic with a little more upside.
The only point I was bringing to Al there was, even though there's a lot of, I'm laughing. We're talking about Pacers and historically speaking, and then we have a picture of John Starks on the TV. If you take away from Rich, he has the bad boy Dookie mentality in terms of the reputation behind him. He also has, what is this an ad for? He also has that reputation of maybe being a dirty player or a dumb player at times. But aside from that, though, he's an emotional player. He's clearly got an insanely hard work ethic. Otherwise, and can play the game itself. Otherwise, Coach K wouldn't be giving him the opportunities he had, and he wouldn't have had the career he had at Duke. In terms of his work ethic, it would fit the mold of what Indiana basketball is about. You don't want players that are going to be soft. You want players that are going to get dirty, get down in the trenches, and leave it all on the line. I know there's definitely a need for more athleticism, more upside, but he's definitely got those intangibles you would want.
No, I think the Pacers like some high energy guys. I think that they're kind of moving that way. They certainly want people that have some personal discipline and are ready to make the sacrifice needed to improve in the off season. So,
yeah, I'd also like to make the point too that he's obviously got his on the court issues. Pacers might be maxed out on that with Lance Stevenson there at the helm.
It very well could be. And to build on that, not that they have a lot of personalities there, but per Woj himself, Utah has no plans. Oh, excuse me. Never mind. I misread that. Excuse me, Al. It's over. The Jazz have no plans to pass on Grayson Allen with the 21st pick. So it looks like the apocalypse itself, in terms of potential Grayson Allen to Indiana, it looks like those dreams might be dead, or those nightmares finally vanquished, as I believe he's going to be headed to Utah. We'll have to see what happens. But
I think that could be a good fit for him there at Utah with Quinn Snyder there. I feel like they have a pretty strong organization there. I think it's fairly no nonsense there, kind of atmosphere. So I think it could be a potentially good fit there. Obviously, as a Pacers fan again, I'm happy that he's off the board.
So Grayson Allen,
certainly he's going to a little drier state. That might.
I'm not. I'm gonna blame that. Sorry, I have to throw you under the bus under here, old friend. I'm gonna blame that on old wiser age, and I'm gonna step away from that commentary. But specifically for Grayson Allen and headed to Utah, I agree with you, Al. Quinn Snyder in the mix, able to be underneath that leadership. I like the idea of Donovan Mitchell and Grayson Allen together. I believe he's happy about it too. I do. I think Grayson can play. I mean, I don't know what kind of player he's going to end up to be. I don't know how long his career is going to be, but I mean, there's plenty of Duke players. You look at the likes of, as recent memory would show, of the likes of J.J. Redick, of Shane Battier, that have established themselves at the next level and have ended up having long careers, even if they weren't world-beating careers. They were still impressive, helpful careers that involved a lot of maturing as they grew up in the league. I think Utah is a good starting point for Grayson Allen's young career.
Yeah, it should be pretty interesting overall to see how he vibes with that team. Like I said, I think they've got a fairly young team, but I think they've got a strong coach, Quinn Snyder. So, I'll really be interested in seeing how he develops there.
Well, that's what do you think the Pacers are going to be looking at? Jacob Evans, maybe?
Michael Porter is still on the board.
Really?
I'm really interested. Like, really, why he's still there.
The deeper you get into this draft, the more it becomes. And I wouldn't be surprised. And again, this isn't with a tweet yet. I've yet to refresh my page. I wouldn't be surprised if Chicago maybe took a chance on him if they were interested in doing so. But the same could be made with Indiana. I know they were a playoff team, took the Eastern Conference champs themselves to 7 games, and it looked like a promising start to the bright future for Indiana over the course of that whole season. I wouldn't be surprised to see that end up happening. Specifically, though, Shams reporting the Bulls going to go after Chandler Hutchinson with the 22 pick, so he's still going to be there. Brunson's going to be there. Wow. It's going to be very interesting. Al Rich
going to have a tough decision here, Jay Cook.
What'd you say?
I think the Pacers are going to have a tough decision.
Yeah, that's what I was going to ask you guys. You guys are at the heart of Pacer camp in terms of this podcast. Any wish list items? Any strong desires of what you'd truly like to see at this spot?
I'd take a chance, Jay Cook. I'd take a chance. Maybe somebody with a little upside, but risk.
I tend to agree. I mean, I think when you're a small market like Indiana, a guy that has the potential to be a face of the franchise type of player, and Michael Porter, it might be a risk worth taking. I assumed he wouldn't be on the board at this point.
Me too.
And it worries me to some degree that he is still on the board. So I'd like to add that there were some other good forwards that I thought would be nice picks, like Kyrie Thomas of Creighton, and Jacob Evans, Cincinnati, and I think it was Melvin Frazier with Tulane.
Hey, I want to point out to everybody, though, not to interrupt you, Al Cook, but CBS Sports in a number of drafts had Porter still as a top 5 pick. Here's the thing you got to look at. With every team, every great team, there's some luck involved. There's some risk involved. There's a lot of what's going to happen here and when. What's it going to take for us to get where we need to go as a franchise? No. I wouldn't be opposed to seeing a roll of the dice like that. And honestly, Alex, maybe it's not necessarily need to be fearful as much as it is for the Pacers. They maybe take Porter. 22 other teams were just dumb. Maybe that's the philosophy that ends up happening there. Should it come to fruition?
Yeah, hey, I think I'd be all right with it.
Yeah, it could be. I think, like I said, it's a risk you should really factor into. And, I could see Kevin Pritchard going either way because, obviously he's had Brandon Roy and Greg Oden, 2 guys that I think obviously one proved to have a lot of talent and one that wasn't really able to show his talent, and Greg Oden and him consistently. Those may be in the back of his head, but I think he would be a good he would be a good calculated risk that I don't think many fans would be upset with.
A name that I thought about bringing up, and I'm not going to say anything about it specifically without some permission from you guys, even though you should know what you signed up for on a live draft podcast. But do you want to know who the rumors are the Pacers are taking, or do you want to wait and let this be a special moment at 23?
Well, I'm going to pull up Woj here.
Okay, then in that case, it looks like that in that particular instance, Aaron Holiday is who they're tracking right now, who I was actually going to bring up. That's the rumors from Shams. Rich, we talked about this with I didn't want to bring him up specifically because I didn't know if another guard would be the right move. I was thinking actually, in addition to that, maybe Jalen Brunson as a possible fit in Indiana. But in terms of Aaron Holiday, I mean, you're talking about, Al, I mentioned it maybe 20 minutes ago. This is a player that averaged about 20 per game at UCLA. He went down as one of the, arguably best guards that's come out of UCLA in terms of on-paper stats the last 5-10 years.
I actually didn't think he would be around this late.
Nor did I. I thought that he might go actually 3 or 4 picks ago when myself and Al were talking about it. Obviously, we're not going to know until I see more sources that are saying it, but Shams is as good as any in terms of that might be the place to go. I don't think that's a bad move, but it is stunning to me that I tell you what, this could be interesting. I don't want to move away from Indiana because I know this was one of the big picks we were interesting on, but we're getting closer to maybe Magic and the Lakers wanting to roll the dice on Porter, but specifically focusing on Holiday. You're looking at Drew's younger brother here, and it very well could be a very interesting fit. You got Carlos and Oladipo, and at that point, Holiday working for some playing time within those two guards.
Yeah, I think, I feel like it's somewhat of a safe pick. So, obviously, the Pacers and point guards, have been an issue for a while as far as, drafting a great point guard. It's, probably Jamal Tinsley is probably the last great point guard of theirs that they have drafted. So I see the need there, but I don't know exactly if it's, I'd maybe like to see them take some more chances as opposed to picking Holiday, but thought maybe there might be better value on the board at this point, but Michael Porter being there.
What the hell happened here?
But anyways,
we got a Century 21 minute right now,
and the great Haley Neely, reminding me about some knowledge myself that I didn't mention here. Obviously, the Indiana faithful know this, but Aaron's brother Drew, of course, married to Lauren Holiday, Ben Davis standout and former U.S. women's national team soccer player in her own right. A little Indiana connection always seems to be attached somewhere.
I do think, given the Paul George total rejection of Indiana, that perhaps they're also looking for people they think might want to stick around.
I mean, I would agree. I would also agree that's probably the goal of most franchises, but I tend to agree that I see what you're doing there in terms of like Indiana ties or Indiana lineage and in terms of maybe loyalty factors. I also wanted to point out to you, Rich, and Al, you would know this as well. UCLA in terms of prospects has been pretty good to the Pacers over the years. There's no denying that.
Well, it's true.
Yeah.
I don't know if UCLA's been quite the powerhouse they used to be.
Yeah,
they've obviously improved quite a bit.
The leaf doesn't fall far from the tree. That's all I'll say.
It's a shame Google Hangouts removed my sound effects 2 years ago because they'd be very helpful at times like that. Things do come full circle, though, because you think about it, the last I'm generalizing here. If there's another one of you historians in the room that want to correct me on this, the last great guard to come out of UCLA that ended up in Indiana, obviously the Hall of Famer himself, the great Reggie Miller. And you look at overall that whole story of who Indiana fans wanted to be drafted on that night. Steve Alford himself, the head coach of Aaron Holiday at UCLA. So there you go. There's some life comes at you fast, how time can change things.
These double foul viewers, I'm sure, are loving all of this Pacer content.
There's right now we are circling the teams and definitely very heavy on the Indiana talk right now. No doubt about that.
I would say it's deja vu all over again.
There you go. Well played.
I'll give you some sports quotes there, Jacob.
Hey, Jim, Dan Le Batard's got Poppy here at the Double Foul podcast. We've got Pop, aka Rich Cook.
There you go. I don't know if I hope Le Batard show doesn't sue us for such equally talented quality being brought to the broadcast from Poppy and Pop for sure.
Yeah, that's right.
So the biggest surprise on the board right now, it continues to be Michael Porter Jr. They talked about a lot of.
I was kind of hoping in a way the Pacers would take a flyer on him, but apparently there's real concerns.
I don't think that. I don't know. I don't think that.
Wait. Time's
What do you-
expired, Jay Cook.
Keep talking, Jay Cook.
I didn't even think about this. I can't remember how to pronounce his last name, so you have to forgive me. You Pacers locals, how do you pronounce? Is it Enigbogu Ike's last name?
Ike Anagobu.
There you go. Ike Anagobu. I told you to butcher it. So anyway, you have Ike Anagobu, TJ Leaf, and Aaron Holiday. Those are players the Pacers have drafted in the last 2 drafts, all UCLA Bruins. So
That's
really weird.
You had Darren Collison on there. He wasn't drafted, I believe, by the Pacers, but he.
No, he wasn't. But you're right. He was. He was a Bruin.
Former UCLA player as well. They seem to like UCLA there.
We're the UCLA of the Midwest.
I mean, there you go. Nice. You look at. Again, I was joking about it, but I really didn't think about the ties there specifically. I mean, I know Reggie's the one that comes off the tongue in terms of like UCLA and the Pacers, but it is an interesting mix in terms of UCLA history that's currently being formulated on that team.
It's a little undersized, I would say, at 6 foot, but
still averaged 20 a game. Like I said, he actually led the Pac-12 in scoring last year. Pac-12 heritage galore, both his parents going to Arizona State, when they were his age, Drew and Justin, his brothers. I don't know. I don't think this is a bad pick. I'm happy for the selection. I think it'll be fun. Al, is this in your mind a move that just, it gets slid right in there, and in terms of being able to add more depth at the guard spot for the Sirs?
It's an interesting pick, I guess, in a way, because they have Corey Joseph and Collison. Both guys that may not even be here in 2 years here. Collison may not end up being here by the end of the offseason potentially. But
yeah. Oh, we can't forget Joe Young either.
But I think he's overall I think he's a good depth pick. I feel like he may not have a immediate impact right away, but yeah, he's obviously got the pro sports lineage here. To back him up. So, pretty interesting pick. And like you said, with Michael Porter Jr. falling, he may become the true shot for me this draft. Just the fact that we're seeing him still available at pick 24.
Had the mic muted there. It's pretty shocking to think about on a lot of cylinders. Rich Cook, in terms of how this draft is shaped up, is Porter for sure your biggest surprise, or is there another name that's continued to fall a little bit that's giving you any fits in terms of how things have gone down?
I would say that's probably my biggest shock. I thought for sure it'd be a lottery.
Do you think, to reiterate what Alan mentioned, Rich, do you think it's an easy fit for Holiday? You think it adds the necessary depth needed for Indiana? Anytime you can have guards in this day and age of the league, it's not going to hurt you by any means. How do you feel about it?
I always feel like guard's probably the easiest position to fill personally. Certainly he's got a lot of scoring ability. We do seem to be a little bit relying upon the UCLA connection there for some reason. But we'll see.
It's wild for sure. Class acts all around the Holiday family. I think
there's advantage to somebody that has family who is involved in the sports professionally. I think they might have just a bit of an edge on knowing what it takes to get to the next level. Pacers do seem to go that way. Joe Young certainly had that in his background. Darren Collison certainly has the speed, not the same professional sport, but it does seem like the Pacers have kind of gravitated to those type of players in the past.
Well, I think Collison obviously had parents that were both professional athletes, if I'm not mistaken.
Yes, exactly.
So, I think it's another good point, I think, in general with Aaron Holiday is I think having his brothers, in the league here, I don't feel like they're going to let him fail. Really, in the same way you would think Seth Curry and Steph Curry. I think Seth Curry, you would argue, has developed as a player quite a bit and is still, making a name for himself in the NBA. So I think there's a point to be made about having family, that is in the league, has been in the NBA before.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I mean, anytime you have a lineage like that, it's definitely something where when you've seen different relatives or different family members go through the same path, can speak on the experiences that you're going through. It's definitely not going to harm you in that regard. As we do move over slightly from the Pacers talk just for a bit, Portland themselves are on the clock. You look at Damian Lillard, CJ McCollum, leading the way in terms of the guard play for Portland. Truthfully, it's so funny. Maybe not funny as much as ironic as it is to think how good a tandem, historically speaking, that type of guard play would be in any other era in the league. Because the West continues to be so dominant, the Portland team kind of does get overlooked and overshadowed at times. Be interesting to see if they maybe roll the dice here on Porter.
Yeah, I could easily see that. I think you brought up the Lakers as well. I think that's a great, chance for the Lakers to take a potential star there for really pretty low risk at this point in the draft. I think Portland would be a nice fit. I think, I think they need to help there at the 3 and 4 positions. And I believe they're trying to sign Yusuf Nurkic here once the free agency begins. This would be a good pick for them.
It'll be interesting. It looks like as the Woj continual Scrabble board words continue, that Anthony Simmons headed to Rip City, it looks like. He was an IMG Academy kid.
High schooler?
Specifically IMG Academy, kind of like prep school in terms of being able to go straight from there instead of playing a year of college ball. If I'm correct on that.
You is he a guy that you have heard?
I because he's IMG Academy, I hadn't seen a lot of Simons. I guess clearly hence the butchering of the name to begin with. I know that the talk has been, as the league itself continues to evolve of what it wants to be, of how impactful the G League is going to be in the next generation. IMG Academy, you don't see a lot of prep school kids that don't go to college. It's a rare occurrence, not that it can't succeed as much as it's just not a route that a lot of people take. You do a search on a lot of mock draft boards. Simons wasn't on that first round list, and somebody wasn't even on the second. So it's funny to look and see. This is an interesting chance taken by Portland here. I don't know. I didn't know a lot about him going into the specific, this specific stretch of the draft. But it is the interesting product of an IMG Academy kid, a prep school kid, making the leap, and we'll see what happens for Portland.
Yeah, I mean, I think seems to be pretty athletic, good defensive player. I think Simon's issues seem to be like with other players in the draft, his shot and his offensive game. So I think it's intriguing in that regard to see him playing with the Trailblazers. I'm sure that McCollum and Lillard and Nurkic will provide most of the offense there for them. But, I felt like maybe there were some other wing and shooting guards out there that maybe didn't have as big of a holes as maybe Simon seems to have.
Yeah, it's interesting. Some fans some fans for Portland talking about how on Twitter that wanting experience and leadership at the helm with their future, and they draft a 19-year-old with that pick. It's interesting. I don't know, Rich. Sorry, didn't mean to.
Quick question for you, Jacob. Do you think there's a possibility the Pacers are looking to trade one of their existing point guards?
I mean, that's why I kept bringing up if depth was a key for them. I mean, I don't think that's off the table. I mean, obviously Oladipo is, but I mean, in terms of
figure out why, it just seems like a weird pick. But
I mean, I thought, and I wasn't upset about it.
Could Kemba Walker still be in the offing?
Specifically, yeah, I'm not sure. I'm not sure currently. The reason I'm taking my track off in terms of what I think the Pacers are going to do there is we were actually off the board specifically, guys. Thankfully, I guess just at this point in the podcast, no viewers on board. Maybe the reason behind that is because in all the hype and chaos of talking Pacers talk, we had missed that and the 14th pick in this draft, Porter did go off the board. So not to be our biggest gaffe of the evening.
But, about what the Pacers did there.
What'd you say? What'd you say?
I think I feel much better about the Pacers.
Yeah, me too. Considering
I feel good about the chances of this podcast making the air now.
Yeah, I don't think we're definitely going to scrap the whole thing now and just run rampant with it in terms of major gaffes on the podcast. I'm gonna call blame across the board because I
was up watching some goofy show with the little guy. They're watching some dinosaur show, learning shapes and colors, while you and Big Al missed the biggest pick of the evening.
I felt like I was Batman in the Dark Knight. He's got all the cell phone cameras or whatever in the whole city, that whole screen in front of him. Maybe I had too much going on.
The only way I would believe that would have been helpful for us and we could use that as an excuse is had all the phones been Boost mobile phones and they were failing to work properly for the Dark Knight. We will roll on continually, especially considering the fact that it's doubtful that individuals are going to continue to watch as much of the podcast as we've done in terms of like rewinding. So we'll roll through it and move on. And in terms of on the board right now for the Lakers themselves, and you know what's wild about it in general, not to rehash, I guarantee you we talked about it because we were talking about the promising fit there in Denver. I remember us talking about it specifically. So I'm not sure what exactly where that went off the rails for us, but in this particular instance, for LA's needs, I think it's funny they showed Chauncey and they showed Chauncey Billups' thoughts on their defense, 3-point shooting needs for
Mo Wagner.
And I think it would be very interesting to continue to put the podcast back on rails. If it is Mo Wagner that's coming out and being selected there, I think that's an interesting fit. I wanted to bring him up for Indiana specifically too, even though they arguably pretty crowded at guard, pretty crowded at power forward also. But for Mo Wagner to be able to head to from Michigan to LA, that's a nice fit. I mean, I liked his hustle. It's especially a nice fit in terms of having a big body. Assuming you're shipping out Luol Deng on the latest. Please take this money. Please take this bad contract move in terms of LA. But I don't know. I don't think that is a wrong move there in terms of best available guys. It doesn't necessarily help you full scale with 3-point shooting, but definitely gets you a defensive asset in terms of a big that can still switch and operate in the likes of Wagner.
Yeah, I think he'll fill a nice void there too for Julius Randle, assuming he departs with them in free agency here. But I would have taken Michael Porter Jr. in this spot. But
who I think I think the Celtics are looking strong for that, Jacob.
Yeah,
They're loaded. They could take a chance.
They could take a flyer, and by take a flyer, I mean literally take a flyer, because that's the closest any of these teams were getting to Porter at that point in time. Man, that is. I'm gonna rewatch this at some point. I'm gonna notice where the shift trended, and one of you's getting, maybe myself included, an angry text of how the heck we allowed the podcast to derail that quickly.
It was me, JK.
I'll take responsibility.
Rich, for once, I don't know if it was your fault directly. And we were all complicit, though, regardless, across the board. Suddenly back on the clock, late first round action. Philadelphia set after that trade to bring in Smith to send Bridges over to send Bridges to Phoenix, and bring in Smith from that trade. It'll be interesting to see what they decide to go with here. Best available right now. Players that are still specifically on the board that I wouldn't be stunned to see go right now. I still look at Brunson. I know specifically he's still there. In terms of guys that were projected high that still haven't gone. I don't know, that the draft has kind of started to fall into shape where few picks would really surprise me. Wagner kind of went a little higher than he might have been expected, so I guess you couldn't rule out Gary Trent Jr. in terms of maybe a player somebody would reach on. He was an Adidas Nation kid once. He's projected late in the second round, but Hamidou Diallo is definitely one of the most athletic players in this draft. He's projected early second, but I wouldn't be stunned in that regard to try to add another guard to the play, but that would just be another athletic piece for Philadelphia. I actually don't think Wagner would have been a bad move for them to bring in. But I don't know. Al, any particular bold predictions for what City of Brotherly Love might try to do here?
I think they still could maybe use some insurance on Zaire Smith on that pick. But like I said, I feel like he is a developmental guy to work on his offensive game. I think one of these wings, small forward guys available, I think would be a nice fit. But they could be in the LeBron sweepstakes as well, so maybe that's not an area they want to think about. But if they aren't going after LeBron, I think this would be a nice position to fill with Robert Covington back. So,
yeah, and if anything, though, moving around a bit from Philadelphia, and I would agree that could be a position to be filled for sure. But I'm happy that Wagner didn't end up in Boston, because I really liked Mo Wagner, and I wasn't wanting to see that happen. So happy for him. Instead, it's LA.
He felt like a Brad Stevens player, written all over him. Yeah, I think he seemed like a good fundamentals guy, and obviously, had a great coach, Uline at Michigan. He almost maybe has like a Kelly Olynyk factor in him. He's way better, I think, than Kelly Olynyk was coming out, but
that's a good comparison.
He feels like a very Brad Stevens type of player, so I agree with you 100%, Jim.
Yeah, it'll be specifically with all that, as I did get distracted slightly by the financials that are being talked about on ESPN regarding what the Sixers might be looking to do here. In terms of where Philadelphia decides to go, and in terms of the direction that the rest of this draft is going to take shape, it's got to be Al. I mean, specifically, obviously, Redick, if he wants to come back, is going to be taking a major pay cut compared to the $20 million he was bringing in last year, $17 million, whatever the number was. Covington's probably on the move. I don't know. It's going to be interesting. Exactly where Philadelphia decides to go. Want to hang on to.
Pick whoever LeBron wants.
Well, I mean, some of us don't believe that LeBron is a puppeteer at his own current team, let alone the entire league landscape. So I don't know if that's the kind of phone calls that Brett Brown's having right now. But I like the thought process there.
I'd also like to bring up the point about Ilyasova. I believe he's a free agent, if I'm not mistaken. So that's another small forward position for them, or power forward, depending on where he typically plays, that they would look to fill. I think a guy like Diop would be somewhat interesting as a selection if you were to go there.
Wow, so is that guy so hurt that he's not even in the pick?
I was going to make that joke continually about it. Man, the rich get richer. Michael Porter to Golden State, the 2 picks. It'll be interesting to see the Philadelphia move that they decide to go with here.
I predict the Celtics will pick Porter.
That's bold. That's bold takes, Rich.
I try to go out on a limb every now and then, Jacob.
It's very bold. So Philadelphia,
it's like Landry.
Drafting Landry Shamet from Wichita State. No necessarily full scale shockers in terms of other than college name, of course. Another guard look for Philadelphia. Hard to say what type of impact that makes for Philadelphia. I don't know. I mean, specifically with sorry, I'm continuing to laugh at Woj's adjectives in terms of how he wants to describe how picks are being made. I mean, definitely a good 3-point shooter for sure. That's something Philadelphia desperately needs in terms of adding more depth at that spot, especially if you're bringing in a facilitator like LeBron potentially in free agency. Anytime you can have, spot up shooters or individuals that can create their own shot. I mean, you can't complain about that too much. I don't know. It's shaping up, though, to be an interesting second round of the draft and final 3 picks here with Boston, Brooklyn, and Golden State still left to go. Al, I think the Celtics likely go center here or big man in terms of what they need specifically.
Yeah, I think I also wanted to bring up that point. I think with Philadelphia, I wonder what they do with Markelle Fultz as well now, considering the fact that they've got another potential guard here in Landry that can shoot much better than Fultz, and I think with Simmons there as well, that's with him not having much of a jump shot yet in his career, be interesting to see where Fultz ends up going. If he ends up going anywhere at all.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think that one of the two might be on the move if you're trying to entice a team like a
looking for defenders. You said
like a golden or sorry, like a you're trying to bring in top talent of free agency like LeBron. I think that's an interesting. There's definitely a case to be made there of if you're trying to bring LeBron, you're trying to bring another piece like Kawhi or whoever. Somebody's got to be on the move that's talented and has promise. Fultz is probably in that category. Simmons is in that category. It's interesting to see how those things go.
Yeah, Yeah, I'm interested to see where the Celtics go here. I don't know if the centers on board are of good value and immediate impact type of players, but I know that Mitchell kid, the center, I think he could be potentially a good pick, but he feels like he's needs to develop for a year or two. I think before you really see him have an immediate impact on that team. Is there any other front court players that you can think of, Jim, that would be good fits here with Boston?
I mean, and Al, the connection kind of cut out a little bit. Who did you say you were thinking they might just first name or full name first? Who are you looking at?
It was Mitchell. I think it was Larry Mitchell.
Right,
is that correct?
Right.
Yeah.
So specifically in terms of who I was forgetting about that had fallen, it sounds like that. I know you're getting this report right now that Robert Williams is going to be who ends up going to Boston. This is a player that I guess it is kind of shocking in terms of, at least I'm going off of CBS here. He was projected to go 12th, so falling 15 spots here. Athletic is an athletic 4. He's very he's got a strong wingspan at 7'5". Did not participate in the combine, but averaged 10 boards and 3 blocks a game. Wouldn't be the most surprising move here in terms of a young athletic 4 that can grow and have time to grow in Boston. I like the pick.
Yeah, I like the pick too. I think he feels like a pretty good defensive player here. 6'9", 7'5" wingspan. I think his game has similar characteristics that maybe you'd see in a Clint Capella, DeAndre Jordan, that type of player. So should be cool to see how Brad Stevens, how he shapes Williams here as he enters the NBA.
Yeah, a lot of people talking about him in terms of a steal in some areas. He was in the ESPN Top 100. He was, the 12th ranked player in that class. Falls at 27 to Boston. It'll be interesting. I mean, there's some minor knee concerns there. Some off-court issues here and there, but definitely a great place for him to grow, definitely the right environment for that to happen. And now the Celtics about to make that selection. The defending champions, back-to-back defending champions, set to make their selection here soon.
Yeah, I'm
that and the Golden State Warriors, of course.
Yep, the Golden State Warriors will get some high quality players. Just sitting for them at the late tail end here of the first round.
Yeah, it is going to be it's going to be wild for sure to see where this first round ends tonight. As we're a little bit ahead there on both ends. They'll be taking Williams off the board.
27th pick in the 2018 NBA draft, the Boston Celtics select Robert Williams III from Texas A&M University.
There you go. So Robert Williams headed that way. And now Golden State essentially has the ball in their court after an exciting run for them. Back-to-back champions, not needing to buy any picks to this point in time. And I mean, like we mentioned now, I mean, anytime you have a player, as we're jumping around topics right now, but anytime you have a player that has the high upside potential of Williams, even if there's questions about his work ethic, even if there's questions about what he brings to the table, can't think of a better individual to be guiding him to the next level than Brad Stevens.
I would tend to agree. I think also bringing up the point of some of the leaders in that on that locker room and on that team, I should say, with Al Horford there. And, I think Marcus Smart, even though he's a free agent, if he ends up back there, I think he's another good emotional leader that would help keep Robert in check. And, I think it's just a strong organization, obviously, and a strong coach with Brad there. It should be a good situation for them. Moving on to the Warriors here, I was thinking a wing would be a good position for them to draft as well with Andre Iguodala, getting older by the day. So,
yep.
And obviously any kind of depth for them on the bench that is cheap and produces high quality value seems like where they would target. I don't know. What are your thoughts, Jim?
Yeah, I mean, I agree. You got to get depth. I would follow your line of reasoning that the forward slot is likely where you go. Overall, in terms of what I kind of expect to see from what I kind of expect to see from Golden State would be that exact rule of thought that you operated under, which is getting cheaper players that are able to come in and contribute right away. I will say this, though. There were times, and I know you're not saying this, but there were times where you had the likes of, Quinn Cook, of the youth that were there within Golden State when Iguodala went down, and you look at the steps that all of a sudden these young, just drafted, sometimes purchased players were expected to fill, and the team looked sloppy at times. I mean, I know it didn't matter, but you can make the case and almost cost them against Houston.
Sure.
That youthfulness is only going to get you so far. And, I know like Kevon Looney, that's what I was looking for then. Looney, I mean, he's getting older in terms of like experience. Like, I know you're going to say the same thing about Quinn Cook, and he's been an incredible story to watch. But, I mean, you cannot replace the type of leadership and the type of versatility that they had when they were bringing in the likes of Livingston and Iguodala and just turning them into rejuvenated players. I know it's a dynasty budding, but how much the league is going to shift away from we want to beat you to we want to join you more. Like, I mean, role players to join them. I mean, Nick Young was the most versatile pickup that they had last year, and look at the impact that he had in the over the course of the whole season. A lot of people don't expect him to be back next year. I don't know. I think you can only, it's the trend and ebb and flow of dynasties in this league, eventually trying to cut corners to keep dominant cores together. You're going to milk as much championship life as you can to a point where suddenly your depth doesn't matter, and all that matters is that your top guys are performing night in and night out. And that's how it was last year with the Warriors. The bench, yes, it mattered, but truthfully, at the end of the day, it didn't. As long as the 4 Hall of Famers were performing at a high level, you were going to be okay.
I agree 100% with everything you said, Jim. I think, that they really just have to find replacements for guys like Livingston and Iguodala because, it's the risk that they run having, 4 all-stars and eventual max players here on their team. So, they're stuck in a bind in that regard due to replacing some of their value where they can and keeping, obviously, their max, their best players here. So, it's kind of a very fine line that they have to walk at this point, obviously, going forward, especially with teams like Houston gunning for them, Boston, and, wherever LeBron ends up.
Yeah, no, I agree. Man, I'm glad I have the noise canceling headphones in. Don't need to hear any more of that Warriors talk. Oh, good, we got the JR highlight in there. That's necessary for the Warriors highlights. That's good. Um,
2018 NBA Draft, the Golden State Warriors select Jacob Evans from the University
Oh, man.
of Cincinnati.
Jacob Evans, he was a good pick. I hate to say it. That was a guy that I kind of wanted the Pacers to take.
I mean, they had him. I mean,
They
it's
did.
just so weird for these. They had him listed at 30th in the mock draft on CBS Sports. So to end the draft so close to it, I mean, it's so tough the later you get into these drafts because maybe Evans, like, what does the development do for a player when you're getting an opportunity to play behind and learn from, insane Hall of Famers, future Hall of Famers like KD, like Steph, like Clay, like Draymond, to go from that to being maybe a focal point on a team that's young and youthful, like Indiana, like Atlanta, like Boston, like it's Philadelphia. It's hard to gauge it, I mean, it's one of those moves where it's like, Al, what we talked about. You're getting a player that needs just depth. They don't have a lot of calls for you need to be our playmaker. We just need you to be a body and show effort. And I don't know, Steve Kerr has shown more with less before. I don't think it's something that's going to be looked back on and say they blew this pick by any means.
No, not at all. I think Jacob Evans brings a lot of versatility. I think defensively he's very, very good. I think his main issue was his offense and shooting. But if I remember correctly, last year I think his outside shooting was up to about 38 or 39%. So he's really improved that facet of his game. And he's just one of those picks that I really envy the Warriors for. Because I think he'll have a big impact as far as role players go on that team.
Yeah, I would agree. I would agree fully with all that. I'm just baffled at the luxury tax and the amount of tax totals the Warriors are going to be paying these next couple of years. But that is the price for having championship level success year over year in this league. Man, I don't know. The main story right now in the draft, though, is the first round about to come to a close. The Brooklyn Nets. Maybe the last year they're going to have the last year they'll have a pick, assuming they're not in the lottery. Assuming they're in the lottery next year, the last time they'll have a pick that they are having to chase in order to get into, as they talk about the lopsided trays right now. Oh, that's a little wild. I don't know why we put the Louisiana Purchase on there, because we're out of sports references.
Quite the reach there.
Yeah, man. I'm surprised we never mind. One of the biggest
I give credit to Sean Marks and that front office there.
such insanity.
Slowly trying to rebuild that team. And the good thing is, though, I get to spend the whole night with you guys.
Well, I think the Nets obviously have a lot of positions to fill, I would assume. So, obviously, Dwight Howard looks like he's going to be bought out and become a free agent. So I wonder if they look for another big down low. I'm not sure where you think they'll go, Jim.
I'm just realizing, I don't know which way they're going to go, but that Bobby Marks, who's doing all this coverage, was the assistant general manager for the Nets when they made that move.
Oh, man.
That's why they're bashing him right now.
Oh, I didn't hear him getting bashed, but that's got to be about as bad as you would see on a Comedy Central roast.
Man, that's wild. He talked about how you got to have a safety net when you're making moves like that, and that they did not. And
they just had a Brooklyn net.
Nice. Oh man.
Had to add the puns because Pop wasn't there. So
No, somebody's got to pick up that slack. I believe there might be some podcast work done tomorrow with the Double Foul podcast. Of course, Colin unable to be on with us today due to prior commitments. But Al, one topic that'll be discussed then is Dwight Howard supposed to be negotiating a buyout with the Nets shortly after that trade they just made. So basically, a little less money between Howard and Mozzie, I believe. So they get rid of Mozzie and then some picks, and then they're going to buy out Howard, and that's how things will roll down as their plan there. So a lot of intrigue there for where he'll end up. Such a fall off over the last 9 years for Dwight, but interesting to see where he chooses to head his destiny. If he has free agency via a buyout. But Al, the Nets, I don't know. I mean, maybe there's still a lot of talent left here. Gary Trent Jr., Jalen Brunson's still there. I mean, it all really depends on what they are looking for and what they really need. We confirm that Michael Porter Jr. is not there, so they can't they can't grab him there. I still really do like Hamidou Diallo. I don't know if he's necessarily the direction that they decide to go with. But the Nets are still years and years away from contention. This is still just trying to build a young core. So I don't know. I always like athletic wings, Al, especially in this day and age.
Yeah, I mean, I think having 3-and-D options, versatile wings out there are crucial needs in this era of the NBA. And I know that Damari Carroll, I think, has 1 year left on his deal, if I'm not mistaken. So maybe they look to fill that void there. And I think, Bates Diop or Kyrie Thomas would both be nice picks. Melvin Frazier. Any of those type of wings, I think, would be nice, solid picks for the Nets overall.
Yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't argue with that. It's a wild look for the Nets as they, still have promising talent on board, despite the fact that Brooklyn Nets fan is attendance. Despite the fact that without the picks that they've lacked the first rounders the last 4 or 5 years, but they still have youthfulness around their roster. Not lottery pick youthfulness. Well, Russell, obviously, but it's interesting.
Yeah, it's very interesting. They're a very young team. Obviously they finished in 12th, so they can only go up as far as their stock, I would assume. And it looks like overall they picked Dazan Musa, could be butchering that name badly, from Bosnia. Looks like a developmental pick that I'm assuming will be overseas for a few seasons. Not sure what your thoughts are, Jim, on him.
I was really hoping they were going to take Judge Cook. That was Brooklyn's main goal there. Al, I'm not going to lie. The first time I had heard of Bosnia Herzegovina was I think in either geography class or while trying to pick random teams to choose from when you look at the international teams on 2K's international mode. So I couldn't tell you much on the young man from Bosnia Herzegovina. I don't know.
Yeah, I tend to agree. I don't know much about him either.
We are lacking in the international expertise that we needed in preparation for this. I will leave that on the notes for next year. That need to invest heavily in international.
On late first, early second round international players.
Yeah, exactly. Absolutely. That's definitely going to be a point of emphasis for all involved in the as we prepare for next year's draft. Yeah, I don't know. Somebody tweeted, which is funny because it looks exactly like that on the big screen. Byron Metcalf, ESPN. Somebody sent me the grainy YouTube video link on him, which you get a lot from the international prospects.
Oh yeah, it's always great seeing ESPN or NBA TV have the grainy video and have their experts on there breaking it down.
Absolutely, Al Cook. Man, it's interesting. It's interesting to look at, but it's fun to see the rise of international players continue to get more commonplace than the league. I mean, they've always been there, but it's no longer just like the Spurs drafting international players. Everybody's making an emphasis on it. It's an important spot for everybody to look at. And truthfully, I think that anytime you have the league and the game itself spreading globally, that's the goal of the brand. That's the goal of the mission of the league, is to continue to open basketball to, all races, creeds, nations, ethnicities in general. You want to make the game of basketball a global game, and it's fun to see international players no longer be flare-outs or one-hit wonders or one in a millions. I don't know. It's an interesting education that States fans in general continue to need to watch and be intrigued by.
Yeah, I think another great point is just how much the European game has evolved within the last decade specifically. There's a lot of great stars that have come over and made names for themselves. So it's just cool to see the NBA and European basketball players, international basketball players, see their impact here on the NBA level.
Absolutely, could not agree more. The Hawks rounding out the first round of the draft this evening. Looks like taking Omari Spellman before Adam Silver hands over to Deputy Commissioner Mark Davis for the night.
Very interesting that he got picked ahead of Jalen Brunson. I wouldn't have anticipated him getting picked before Brunson. I think he's pretty athletic, big, but he seems somewhat like a dinosaur in terms of today's NBA for power forwards, for centers in today's game. But very intriguing that he got picked ahead of Brunson.
Absolutely, and correction on that. As I mentioned, Deputy Commissioner Mark Tatum set to take the stage for the second round of picks. Al, throughout this, first step into the water of draft coverage for the Double Foul podcast, definitely a lot of excitement, a lot of drama, a lot of news that wasn't, and a lot of news that was. Flyers that couldn't have been taken that we thought should have been taken. Across the board, a lot of content to run with, I should say, a lot of fun through round one. However, as we do dive into the second round, I know it is a Thursday evening. I know there's a lot of action going on, as apparently Judge Cook himself, too much excitement here on my end, also causing havoc and chaos as expected, as I'm sure the fans at Barclays Center are as well. But Al, we'll cut this at round one. We'll hang up the boots and call it an evening. But Al, some final thoughts in general for a thrilling NBA draft round one coverage, and your biggest surprise still on the board that you expect to see. I also have one last question I'm going to save for you before you answers those. But final thoughts, and then just overall, biggest surprise of a name you still see on the board.
I thought overall this podcast, was good as far as this half of this first round. I think we saw a lot of intrigue, and I think we fictionalized quite a great amount of intrigue as well. So, I think I feel like Jalen Brunson, as far as guys that I think will stand out here in the second round, I think his value's dropped here to where he would be a great second-round pick. Like I said, he's got a 10, 12-year career here as a Derek Fisher-type player ahead of him in the NBA. I think he's a very interesting pick. I also like the Melvin, trying to remember his last name now, but from Tulane, the small forward I brought up earlier. He seems like another good 3-and-D wing. Yeah, there we go. So,
yeah, I'm going to say Hamidou Diallo, Gary Trent Jr., and undoubtedly Jalen Brunson, probably my players to watch for in terms of players I'm surprised are still on the board. It'll be interesting to see how everything ends up sorting out from there. But, it'll be it should be a fun second round for sure. And it'll be interesting to see where all those chips end up falling, as a lot of the mock drafts saw a lot of second round projected players end up in the first round early on. So, yeah, Gary Trent Jr., for sure, Hamidou Diallo as well, and Jalen Brunson, my three that I expect to see go very early in this second round of play. And, Bates Diop out of Ohio State also, just to throw in there to close things out. Al, last thing I wanted to ask you, you got 19 picks before the Pacers decide to close out their draft action. What do you see from them? What do you expect to see? I know it's a long ways away out, but if you could pick a remaining player right now, probably need a player that can create his own shot. I know that Holiday will do that, but definitely need a little bit more. Definitely need a little bit more playmaking for sure to go along with Oladipo.
Yeah, I think they need some more athleticism too at the 3 spot. Another 3-and-D type player here would be a nice welcome addition. I think those are kind of the main areas they need to look at. Possibly power forward as well, with Thad Young possibly on his way out. I think those are the 2 main areas I think they need to address.
Yeah, I would agree. That'll be interesting to watch out for Indiana. It'll be interesting to see how the rest of this draft does unfold. But, Al, I want to thank you in general for taking the time to off the bench tonight and get a little draft talk on the action this evening. It was a pleasure to have you on, and I hope to have you back for future Double Down podcast action as we continue to build ourselves here in the 2018 offseason and beyond.
Hey, thank you, Jim, and I hope all the Double Foul viewers are okay with all the Pacers content that was covered here in this draft.
You got to be heavy on what you know, for sure. And when you have 2 Indiana full-scale locals in the form of yourself and Pop Cook over there, you gotta love the wisdom that's being brought on. And maybe you're gonna be heavy on the Pacers for a little bit, but it covered up some of the other blatantly heinous errors that might have been involved in the same stretch of time. But anyway, for Pop Cook, Rich Cook himself, for Al Cook, for Haley Neely getting some shout outs on this podcast this evening, and for Judge
Insider
Cook.
Information, by the way.
And so some insider information there for sure. For Judge Cook and for the absent Colin O'Connor, this is Jimmy Cook saying until we talk to you next time with Double Foul Podcast, potentially tomorrow for an emergency reaction pod where maybe Colin O'Connor will be there with us. So long, everybody. We'll see you next time.